Okay, I think we're live, and welcome to another broadcast of Virtual Fridays Dire Literary Series. And tonight, my guest is C.D. Collins, who is such a broad writer of work and styles of work. But a little bit about C.D. We can go to her. Bio here, and just to wrap things up. Folks, if you're really interested in CD, go to cdcollins.com. But just to summarize, she's written a collection of short stories, Blue Land, a collection of poetry, Self-Portrait with Severed Head, a novel, Afterheat, currently working on a memoir. She's a poet, a musician. She has also won a Best Spoken Word album at the Boston Poetry Awards. So there's a whole lot to know about CD. She's a fascinating person, and there's also a film that was made about her, and we'll talk about that later too. So I would love to turn it over to CD Collins right now.
In a small town, there is trust in the person across the table, the other side of the cash register, the other end of the phone line. If I say I'll be back with your money this afternoon, you know I'll be back, purely because I say I will. Because you know my daddy and my cousins. You know we're going to be sharing the same God's acre until kingdom come. But there's also mistrust in the person across the table, because he knows your daddy and your cousins. You can never escape him. You can never have anything just to yourself without having to hide it. And it is this inside hidden part where things can fester, especially at night, and especially with drink. When I was 5, I stood in the front seat of the car while my mother speeded down country lanes and careened around blind curves on the wrong side of the road. She drove with one foot on the accelerator, the other on the brake, cup of coffee in one hand, cigarette in the other, and never once used a turn signal. At that time, the speed limit was 75, which Kentucky motorists regarded as a suggested average, even on the winding pikes, branches, runs, and levees. No one had ever heard of child restraints, designated drivers, or secondary smoke. Winter mornings, the Buick's interior filled with the mingling incense of filterless pell-mells and Chanel No. 5. The car climbed steep grades with the ease of a panther. Inside, my mother was like a beautiful wild animal too, with her untamed blonde hair and fox jacket. Unpredictable, preoccupied with missions I could scarcely comprehend. I regarded her from a distance, the dark brows above intent violet eyes, the small, full mouth, never knowing when she might strike. The moment it was warm enough to drive with the top down, my mother and I took 20-mile detours home from shopping, topping the mountain crests and sailing into the lengthening dusk as we devoured light bread, spice drop candy, and entire quarts of blueberries. We pull into our driveway, blue-lipped and exhilarated, as the family dogs rush the car, scratching its glossy red paint. I'd lose her then, to the dogs, to my father and brother whose faces appeared behind the screen door like gibbous moons. We'd unpack the groceries, fill the blue satin glass candy dish with the remaining spice drops, and make dinner. My mother's dogs, spoiled to the point of hysteria, followed her room to room with wet, fearful eyes, lest she escape again. They sat at her feet when she played the piano, singing as close to the melody as they could get. The family hierarchy positioned dogs far above cats, which were relegated to the outdoors. I'd find my kittens on the road, their eye roots bulged out like diced potatoes, then bury them in shoe boxes with creek rocks for headstones. My parents seemed to regard cats as having the loose morals of Locust Street floozies who shimmied up to men on bar stools down at Jose's, spelled Hozays. As punishment for their wanton reproduction, my parents drove my mama cats out into the country and dropped them off. It's not like my parents never visited Locust Street. I'd wait for my mother in the car outside Jose's while she went inside to look for my father. I'd stare at the sign for Kentucky Utilities, the neon man with the bolt of electricity in his hand who blinked off and on. Ready kilowatt, your electric servant. It seemed I'd test how close I could get the cigarette lighter's red coil to my skin before it singed. It seemed like hours since my mother had gone in there, her derringer retrieved from the glove compartment and dropped into her purse, casually, like a roll of mints. At home, my brother and I listened to the continuing argument from the basement, where we read Archie comic books, smoked cigarettes, and sniffed gasoline from the lawnmower can. I trust that woman about as far as I can throw her, my mother shouted, which ain't very damn far. Their feet shifted back and forth above our heads. You're stepping out on me. Like hell, you are. Stop. You're both right, I found out later, after I'd moved away from home to the relative safety of inner city Boston. My parents divorced, my brother started his own family, and my mother turned the corner about cats. Now she's the one who takes in strays, naming them after men she considers strong-minded. Louis Farrakhan, Khomeini, and her favorite, Hussein, a black Persian she has nicknamed Hootie to avoid his being shot by the neighbors. Hootie, she calls out the back door. She found him by the side of the road with one of his little legs broken. Somebody must have thrown him out of their car, she says, as though she can hardly fathom such a thing. Hi, everybody.
Hey, hey, Sadie. Great reading. And Laura, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Now, is that something that you read? Was that something new or coming up, or what is
well,
that?
This is I have read two excerpts. One was from Afterheat, and Afterheat is my novel, and this is Afterheat. Do you know what that word means?
No.
It is, in Fukushima, when they had the meltdown, they had the tsunami and they had the meltdown. Afterheat is the extreme temperatures that are generated by a nuclear explosion or a nuclear reactor, and they can't put that fire out. It's a persistent heat, and it has to be removed now and a year from now. And like that, memory can be like that. It can be like Afterheat. And this deals with themes of this person was burned. This is a picture of me, but it is a novel, and about World War II and the psychological fallout of that. And then I read Vigilante's Advance from my book Blue Land. So excerpt from both.
And you're working on a memoir, correct?
Well, I'm working on a novel, and the Afterheat is the first, say, like 34 years of this person's life, and then the novel picks up in early 30s and goes forward from there. It's called The Creation of Silver, and I'm working on that now. What I have is a collection of stories and essays about Kentucky. I had started to write a book about my hometown, and it was going to be nonfiction. I can't do that. I can't tell the interesting stories if I write.
But your life seems to have been a succession of interesting stories. In fact, there's a film made or completed on your life and directed by Jean Donahue.
Yes.
And it had to do with how you as an example of overcoming difficulties. And her quote was, even people with the worst circumstances can survive. Now, do you consider your life and piece of your life as being in the worst of circumstance?
Well, this movie, Native Daughter, she's been working on this for several years and she's finishing it up. She has another project she's working on. This is going to be part of a Southern, under the Southern Cross, a queer trilogy, she's calling it. And so she hasn't finished it yet. Yes, I was involved when I was 10 years old in an underground gas explosion. And this, in that year, in 1961, children did not survive being burned over 50% of their body. Somehow I survived. And I feel like that has given me something of a mission. And these underground, one of them being making a short documentary video about this, one of these being that these pipelines blow up all the time. Our whole country is, it's underneath all of us. And they would blow up in Kentucky, and they think, well, nobody's there in Kentucky, who cares? Not until one blew up in California and hurt a lot of people did they start having a national movement to have safety valves and that kind of thing on the pipelines. So it's an important issue. Kentuckians, there's Keystone Pipeline. There was a bluegrass pipeline that was going to go underneath Kentucky and basically carry fracking effluvium. And they just lied to us and said, this is providing gas, and the rednecks and the Christians and the Democrats and the Republicans got together and stopped it. The $1 billion enterprise, they stopped it. So we can do some things. We make a lot of mistakes, but we can do some things.
It has to be something major to get all those groups together in the same cause.
Yeah.
So now getting back to that, you were saying back in 1961, children didn't survive from an accident and burns such as that.
Yeah.
Now, you must have realized that because of that, you were different than other people. Do you feel that that's something that sort of fueled you into writing?
I was writing at, I think it did. It absolutely did, because it made me even further more the other, growing up with classmates and the burns were extreme. They were over half of my body and very conspicuous. And a lot of comments were made to me growing up. And I do feel like that it fueled me. But at 4 years old, I remember thinking, this world that people are describing is not the world that I see. And so I started articulating that discrepancy pretty early on. So I do think that it fueled it.
Now, some of the essays that are in Big Little Town, do they cover some of the ground that the film covers? So if people want to find out some background, they just pick up that book and kind of get a head start.
Well, this book is, what I'm doing now is I'm publishing small pieces of it in small presses. So it has not come out yet. And I've changed the name. It was going to be called Big Little Town when it was about my hometown. And then what I realized was, this country is so divided. We're such a misunderstood culture in Kentucky. And we get, we're always on the wrong side of history. We get blamed for things. And there's a lot of Scots-Irish also in it. We were put in between, the Quakers wanted land. And so they brought people over, Scots-Irish, promising them land and putting them between themselves because they had said that they were pacifists and the Native Americans. And so that's how we end up always on the wrong side of history. So that book, that collection of essays, I've been writing for several years, and I've changed it to be called Troublesome Creek: Stories from the Molten Heart of Appalachia. And I decided I didn't want it to have a narrow view. I wanted to build a bridge, to see if I could build a bridge of understanding, because that's what we have to do. And so it's quite a ambitious thing, but I want to be one voice that is communicating without judgment, because you don't change anybody by arguing. You change them right here. You change them by moving them. So these are stories of people from Kentucky, people that I know, people that I've interviewed, and then fiction stories as well.
So with that, I know that, I grew up thinking that like the Southern writer was the writer. They were the best writers. The Southern writers kind of ruled them all, but there's a lot of traction for the writers from Appalachia. So do
Yeah.
you feel that there are great Southern writers that are not involved with Appalachia? Or?
Well, I think that it has to do, there are class issues. There are issues of the crucible of being in a small town. And I think that that for me, what I was saying when I read that excerpt, that when you're in it, you want community and you want to be yourself. And if you're in this small town with everybody knowing your business, you can't be free. And this hidden nature can warp your character. And those kind of bizarre situations that arise are, to me, what Southern Gothic is. That's what those stories are. And they're beautiful stories. I love those stories. So I do think that there is now there's the Appalachian poets, and I think there are beautiful voices. Silas House. I'm involved with the Faulkner Morgan Project, which is a history of LGBTQ history in Kentucky. And there's a lot of things going on in Kentucky that you might not guess. So I'm proud to be part of it.
Well, the country is so quick to stereotype different groups in different locations. So this is important work that you're doing.
Thank you. I didn't know that I was Southern until I went to Pan Painter's class at Harvard Extension, and I opened my mouth, and that's when I found out I was Southern. And that's when all the stereotypes started coming toward me. I gave a reading in Provincetown at the Fine Arts Work Center, and this woman came up to me and she goes, "I don't understand. You're saying all these really intelligent things, and then you have the Southern accent, and it's so confusing to me." No irony. Yeah, there are a lot of stereotyps.
Well, that's because there are shows like Ozark that the people there are just like, hello.
Yeah.
Now, you grew up on Mount Sterling. Is that your place? Like, do you look at, like, I think everybody has a place, like,
yes.
not where they grew up. Just, and I hate using the term happy place because it's not always happy, but it's like this grounding place. Is Mount Sterling your place?
Yes, I put a down payment on a farm there when I was 16 years old, and I just felt like I wanted a place. Not like I thought my parents were going to kick me out, but I just wanted a place that I could steward, and then I paid for it over time, and I've hung on to it, and I still have it. And I have a little Victorian cottage on it, and I'm trying to make a wildlife sanctuary with the 56 acres I have there. And currently there's a dog sanctuary there, where a man takes in dogs that have been abused or people move and don't want them. And so he ushers them all the way through. And I also work in animal rescue there. So yeah, I love being in Kentucky, and I love Mount Sterling, and I have no plans to sell that farm. I'm just grateful I've been able to hang on to it.
And the wildlife sanctuary, that was in honor of your mother, correct?
Yes, because she is an advocate of wildlife and an amazing gardener. And it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to restore a place because, for example, they encouraged, there are a lot of the land was very abused, has been very abused in Kentucky, and even the farm bureau would say, plant this Kentucky 31, which turned out to be fescue, which is an invasive species. And so now there's a big movement to get rid of fescue. So I have planted native grasses and native flowers on my farm. I have redug the pond. And when you do these things, like if you make a flyway for birds, they just come. If you make a good environment for them, they do come. And behind me is another farm, which is about the size of mine. And 100 acres is a very meaningful habitat for wildlife. So that it's a slow process. I've been removing bush honeysuckle for years and years, but it's a worthy project. So I'm firmly rooted in the ground of Kentucky, the dark and bloody ground, which is what Kentucky Kai-en-Tahe means. And I'm devoted to it, and I'm devoted to the people there. And there is so much division, and where I meet with people with radically opposing political views, is we can do animal rescue together. We can agree on stewarding the land. And so I go there. I go to those places with them.
And I do want to mention that the wildlife sanctuary, that on CD's website, people can donate to it, and 100% of the donations restore the resources.
Yes.
But getting back, there was something interesting that you said in terms of getting people together by rescuing animals. We're so divided as a country. And how does this work? In other words, there's so much hatred now, and people are divided in new and different ways. Is there a way to turn that back, or is it too late?
It's not too late. I mean, we can't afford that despair. And so, for example, I was at a church picnic, and I was driving out, and I had this big chicken drumstick I was getting ready to eat, and I saw these 3 white kittens that someone had dropped off by the side of the road. So I stopped, and I called my we cannot talk politics. I called my friend Tom, and I said, Tom, I got to go, come and look at these cats. And then so an hour later, he sends me a picture, your back porch, with those pictures with those cats on it, and food and water. If we try to talk about politics, he can get just very angry, and there's no conversation. But if we're talking about, I lost my keys in the field, then I'm going to call a friend. I'll call my cousin Gordon. We don't agree about anything, and he'll come out with it's a metal detector. He thinks it's a Gager counter. He goes, I'll bring out my Gager counter. We'll find your keys. So you just do it by loving them. That's that, and they love, and they love us.
Now some of your spoken word, some of your spoken word pieces are set to music, and you've also performed musically. So is there a divide? Do you separate the music pieces from the straight written pieces? Well,
it depends. Like, for example, my most current musical partner, Santon, he is a blind autistic musical savant from Russia. And so as we're composing a piece, his mother tells me that he is hearing my words as a melody, and he's accompanying the melody. And so as we compose something together, it's not like we're doing improvisational. We come up with a form, and then we will repeat the form as we work on it. But as I'm writing with him, I begin to see what's extraneous in the piece. When it combines with music, some of the words fall away, and leave me with the essentials of what the poem is that will blend with the music. So that's one thing. one way that I compose. And I mean, I've worked with band members before, and collaboration, when it works, it just makes everything bigger. And I would say that in a song, I'm going to have maybe it's a narration. It's going to be many fewer words. And then if you read the piece in a book, it'd be the longer extended version, but it doesn't sustain with music.
Now, the person that you write with, does he wish he sees a melody in his head or hears a melody in his head? Does he want you to reproduce that melody at that point, or?
No, he is, I mean, he's, as I say, he's autistic, he's limited, but he's a savant. He's a musical savant. So whatever he's doing, there's absolutely no handicap when we come together. And so something happens that he's accompanying the song that is my words. So he's coming up with a musical ambience around what he perceives as my melody as I speak. Meaning, some of it's meaning, and some of it is the music of my words.
Do you guys go out and perform together?
We do. We haven't, for obvious reasons, but we will. We have an album out. It's called Night Animals, and we will hopefully have another one.
Now, when you're working with someone who's on the spectrum like that, what are some of the things that you have to be careful about?
I found out he did not want me to touch his piano. and his mother he's learning tango. And so it's for him to learn to be more comfortable with touch, because he doesn't really like to be touched. And I asked his mom, I said, can I have, really heavy content in here? And he's in his 20s. And she said, you can say anything you want. He'll comprehend some of it. And he's got his memory. He remembers every word, every phrase. And working with him, somehow what I do brings out his original work. And he doesn't write original songs most of the time unless he's working with me. He's doing classical music. And he's a Berklee grad, and he's plays the violin. He's now playing the bandoleon, which is like one of those, it's like an impossible accordion that they use for tango. I went over there the other night and he played that, and his parents danced tango. I mean, they're Russians. They're wonderful. They were having vodka and herring and a fur coat for dinner. Yeah.
Now, you also run workshops.
I do.
What are the age for writing workshops? What age ranges do you work with?
The high school through 110 years old. We're getting ready to do another workshop this year where Joy Harjo, the poet laureate, my town of Malden, where I live, we read the same book together every year. And this year it's Joy Harjo's American Sunrise. And so I'm going to teach a poetry course, and we do our best to intentionally include a diverse audience, a diverse set of students. And so I do Zoom classes. I do in-person classes, and lately I've done Zoom classes. And this year it's going to be called Courageous Poetry, because I think that it's time to be having, not just political divisions, but within the communities, within all the minority communities, like say the LGBTQ community, there's not a lot of conversation going on, and not a lot of understanding. I want these conversations to happen. Without taboo, without judgment. And so I want courageous poetry. I think turning to poetry during these times is a wonderful thing. So I'm going to teach a group, I hope, called Courageous Poetry.
How do you get involved in the group? Like if you have a son or daughter who Do they have to be from Malden, or how do you like?
Well, they don't have to be from Malden, no. We are going to be running the group. It's gonna be in 2022, and you will contact me, and then I will send you. It'll be something that you register for, and then there's a limit on how many people can be in it. But
All right.
I would love to include anybody in this group, and anybody's kids or cousins.
Well, that's thank you so much for coming on with us, and what a wonderful appearance. And where can we find some of your books? And give us a good indie bookstore that you like.
At the moment, the best place to find, Porter Square Books has some things. Also, if you go to my website, you go to go to fiction, I guess.
There it is.
There it is.
This is like looking over my shoulder.
I am launching a YouTube channel called Reporting Live from the Trailer. And one of the little spots I have is called Amazon is the Devil. And so it doesn't mean I'm not selling on Amazon. That's why they're the devil, because you have to. But you see that link, it says buy directly from CD Collins. So that's the best way right now. You can buy directly from me, and I send it to you. And, out of my knapsack superstore.
There you go. And that's how you buy directly. You get to do you get an email direct out to CD. So thanks again, CD. I'm going to now say goodnight to the folks that are watching on Facebook. So if you wrote questions in the chat over at Facebook, and I'm sorry, John wrote a question I didn't see and I didn't get to, so I apologize, John. But if you're watching on Facebook, you can't be involved in the Q&A, and apparently you can't here either. But also, if you want to be on the open mic, you've got to come in here too. And it's not too late to join us with the link if you want to be involved in the open mic. So come on by. Thanks again, CD.
And thank you. And I'll answer that question for John later. Yeah, it was a gun. It was a Derringer, was a gun for sure.